my name is Taylor Rose, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything reading and writing. So in my reading wrap-up for November, I talked about the second book in the Scorched Throne duology by Sarah Hashem, and unfortunately, on my first read-through, I did not like it for many reasons. However, I will caveat that with the fact I really prefer reading books in as close to one sitting as possible. And since I was reading this while traveling in Japan, I wasn't able to actually do that. I read it in many small chunks. So I'm going to give the book the benefit of a doubt and say that my reading experience was heavily colored by that fact. So I am going to reread it today. I did actually get the audiobook, hopefully to make it a little easier. Fingers crossed. If you haven't watched my video about the first book, the Jasad Heir, it's on my channel. Go and watch it if you want. We're going to be talking about the second book, the Jasad Crown. So this book picks up pretty much where the last one left off. At the end of the last book, Sylvia broke off her cuffs that stopped her magical powers and basically blew up a ballroom and was shot up with a sleeping draught by the Urabi, the nicer of the two rebellion groups, kind of, that have been hunting her down. So the Jasad Crown opens up with Sylvia waking up in the Urabi's captivity, where she has discovered they've taken her into the mountains where apparently they've been hiding for the last decade. Obviously, she's not very happy about this, but there's not really much she can do. They're obviously super reverent to her because she is the heir. She's their queen, their Malika. And Sylvia really doesn't want to admit that this is right. So we're opening up with her fighting these feelings. That was the quick and dirty setup. I'm going to start re-listening to this, and I'll be back after the first few chapters. Okay, I just finished the first two chapters, which are from Aaron's point of view. And essentially, he is a wreck since Sylvia's been gone. As we learned in the previous book, Sylvia's friend Safa had been molested as a child by her stepfather, who is someone of importance within the Nizalan court. So Aaron confronts him in this first chapter and is basically like, I know what you do. You have a choice. Either you take this poison and die now, or you don't take the poison and I will torture you for the rest of your life. And so, of course, the creepy stepdad takes the poison and dies, and Aaron has his guards frame the murder as an accident. It is also revealed that potentially, if things just hit the fan completely, that the commoners, whom Aaron has worked pretty hard to make sure live well, aren't forced to join this military unpaid, or if they're the only breadwinner, etc., they will have to force those people to join the military if war breaks out between the four kingdoms. So this is kind of the first inkling we get that Jeru, one of Aaron's right-hand men, might be having some feelings about things because he is one of those lower village, poor peasant boys that was saved by Aaron. So obviously he's not going to want to write against his own people for a bad cause. In the next chapter, Aaron is doing research in the library where he uncovers a book talking about Rovial, the Awal of Jasad. Aaron uncovers a book talking about Rovial's kind of downward spiral and then the magic madness that Sylvia in the first book has kind of maintained that that's fake and not a real phenomenon, because it is kind of the scapegoat reason for why the Jasadis are being murdered left and right by the other kingdoms. Because, eventually they're going to go mad with magic. But according to this book that Aaron finds, magic madness is real, but it only affects one person roughly every 100 years. So he's obviously super interested in this information and is learning about how it actually impacts people. And it seems like children, teenagers start going crazy and then they lash out violently before, obviously, they're put down by whoever is around them. We get a lot of backstory from Aaron in these 2 chapters about his abusive childhood under his father, which, I don't know, kind of par for the course for male main characters, I feel. Yeah, I will say I definitely really enjoy how well developed he is in comparison to Sylvia. There have been no chapters from Aaron where I felt like, oh, this is inconsistent with what we've been told about him or how we've seen him before. So it is definitely just interesting that he's the most consistent character, and he only had 3 chapters in the last book. So the next 4 chapters are from Sylvia's point of view. She wakes up in the underground mountain hiding place where the Urabi have been living. Obviously, she wakes up super disoriented and immediately tries fighting her way out, but she's stopped by a woman named Namsa, and it is revealed during the fight that Namsa is actually Dawood's niece. Now, if you remember, Dawood from the last book was kind of like a father figure to Sylvia, and she was forced to kill him in one of the trials for the Alcala. And this was because Aaron's father, Rowan, thought, he was kind of informed, hey, Sylvia might be a Jasadi. And so it was a test to see, will she kill this Jasadi? And the assumption being, if she kills him, she is not one. If she doesn't kill him, she is. So Sylvia was, supposed to kill him, but basically she just tried really hard to get Dawood to escape. But while she was distracted by a giant flying bird, he stabbed himself in the heart, kind of as a sacrifice, because he knew neither of them were going to make it out alive if they tried to escape. And so Sylvia has to tell his niece of this, hey, he killed himself actually. And so Namsa kind of accepts it, oh no, that does sound like my uncle. And Sylvia's just kind of confused because it's very clear that Namsa hates her because of this misunderstanding essentially about the uncle. But it was still willing to serve her because the whole fight, she's like, Malika, calm down. We're trying to help you. Sylvia's like, you kidnapped me. And Namsa's like, no, we rescued you really. And so it's a whole thing. They kind of reconcile after this fight, and then Sylvia is taken to see the rest of their little city, kind of a small tour, before she's taken to the cafeteria, the dining hall, where everyone's eating lunch. And of course, they see her and are super starstruck. Immediately, Sylvia's like, this is super uncomfortable. I hate this. Do not perceive me. So this young woman who had been there initially when she woke up, but then left when the fighting started, comes back and she introduces herself as Maya, and basically it's just oh, hey, Saya, let's go eat outside. I'm just going to keep referring to her as Sylvia to keep consistent with the last book, because this one jumps back and forth between Sylvia and Asaya depending on who's talking about her. But just for some clarity. So Sylvia and Maya go outside to this kind of cliff overlooking some valleys and stuff, the rest of the mountains, where Maya's basically just yeah, we come out here to practice magic sometimes. Isn't it beautiful? I love coming out here to relax and clear my mind sometimes, but be careful because it's a cliff. And then she just leaves Sylvia out there, which I don't know. It felt weird. I could tell why Maya was doing this, but I'm also kind of she just tried to fight y'all. You can see that this woman's absolutely unhinged, and you're but I'm just going to leave her unattended in the mountains, where even though escape is kind of like not going to happen, there's still possibilities, you know, and she could still get hurt, but that's fine, whatever. And so Sylvia is left alone outside, where she's just crying on this cliff about everything that's happened. And she's kind of decided, I guess, like, well, I'll stay and see what they want, really. When she goes back inside, she accidentally triggers a trap. Like the wall kind of comes alive and grabs her with vines. And she can't escape when this man comes up and helps her, but he's a huge dick about it. And we learn his name's Ephra, and he is actually from the whole pass incident where Sylvia climbed up the cliff face, told them to run away, and then broke the cliff. He was the one she had been speaking to at that time. And so he interpreted that as like a huge betrayal. So he hates her. He thinks this is all a scam. He doesn't trust her. And so they kind of get in an argument about it. But one thing that also confuses me is she kind of like talks a little bit about some of like the myths surrounding the formation of Jasad, and how Rovial pulled the Hirun River down to give more water to Jasad, which does match the map. But then she goes on to talk about how only Jasad has ocean access, when clearly on this map, Nizal has equal, if not more, coastline. I don't know. Because everyone else has to go through the mountains to see the coast. While this is going on, Sylvia notices there's like a weird vein on her wrist, and she just assumes that it's from the cuffs, maybe not having been broken off of her. So she kind of ignores it. No one else seems to notice them, so she just brushes it off. After the whole argument, Sylvia, since she'd been unconscious for multiple days from the sleeping poison, she decides to just kind of explore, walk around as she likes to do, and for some reason decides that she's going to explore the cliffs. Her thing is that she wants to escape, potentially, if she needs to. And she'd heard a rumor from Soraya about how the Hirun runs through the mountains, but like literally through, like under the mountains, which I don't really get. Again, bringing back the map, because the Hirun cuts through the mountains in the map, like as an actual river, not like some sort of underground statuary river or whatever. And so somehow the Hirun's also going underneath the mountains secretly to form waterfalls. And so Sylvia decides that she's going to go explore to find that, maybe see if it exists. After she's like going around for a while, slipping, doing dangerous stuff, she does find a freshwater waterfall. And so she's like, this is it. This is the Hirun running under the mountain. If I need to escape, I need to come back here and go under that. Again, kind of weird. Like, yeah, I guess she has magic now. But my first assumption would be, oh, there's not going to be any oxygen. Like, their magic runs out. How long can she hold out? You know, she doesn't know anything about her magic at this point. How long does she think she can hold out with an oxygen bubble or something to get through the entire mountain range? I don't know. But right after she finds this freshwater waterfall, she turns around and there's someone there. It's like a woman, but the woman starts shape-shifting and just being really like antagonizing to her, sort of in like a weird, we're friends but I'm evil type way. Like, when are we gonna leave? Oh, like, we can get revenge later. Blah, blah, blah. And Sylvia's like, what the fuck? So she's looking around like, what do I do? Like, how do I escape from this monster clearly that's in front of me? When she looks up and she sees Ephra. He's following her. So he's watching her from a cliff up above, and she calls out to him like, help me, find help. And he just ignores her. And so Sylvia's obviously super upset about this. She's like, that little son of a bitch, like, he sat it out for me. And unfortunately, while this is happening, the monster steps towards her and she falls off the cliff into the ocean. And of course, Ephra's like, oh my God. And she's in the ocean thinking she's going to die. After she's fallen into the ocean, luckily, Sylvia's magic kicks in. She forms a giant air pocket. And so she's floating in that pocket, able to breathe. Kind of like, okay, good. I can get, my feet under me.
figure out what to do when her gold vein activates, when she tries to, continue using her magic, and she sees sea monsters all around her. So she flips out and her magic bubble bursts when she is picked up by this giant red fish monster. I'm going to be honest, I'm a little confused what it's supposed to look like. She remembers that this monster was created by Rovial, the Awal of Jasad, from a lizard. But he's described as a giant fish, but then he has like bone vines that come out of him and hold on to her. And so it's like the descriptions, I was thinking an octopus, sort of, but like with retractable tentacles. But then it's talking about ribs and spines. And I'm like, is it literally peeling back its skin so you see its bone structure? I don't know. It was really hard to understand what was being described here. But the sea monster talks to her and is like, hey, I'm trying to save your life. Calm the F down. And it takes her to the surface where she scrabbles back up onto the cliff. Well, it grabs her with its weird tentacle and drops her on the cliff. And it tells her, hey, whenever you need my help, call my name. And so Ephra, obviously still up on the cliff, just watching all this happening. He's like, oh my God, that's the Surikilnaha. And he's just totally flabbergasted. But Sylvia is ready to go. She immediately just starts fighting him. Like, why in the world didn't you help me, you little loser? And he is just like, I think you're a fraud. Like, why in the world didn't you use your magic? I don't think you actually have magic. I think all of this is a trick by the Silver Serpent dude, Aaron. And so Sylvia's just wailing into him, like, basically saying, like, my magic's failed me my whole life, which isn't true. But why would I trust it now? Like, why would I trust it to help me when it never helped me before? Which, okay, that's valid. I get it. Except she spent maybe 6, 7, 8 years with her magic. And like, yeah, obviously she's not going to remember being a toddler, but she remembers using her magic willy-nilly, totally free, to then be like, my whole life, it's never worked for me. Like, it used to work for you. And then it didn't work for you for 10, 12, 13 years. This is me being nitpicky, but Sylvia kind of is ready to make the final blow because she's like, the last time someone said this sort of heinous stuff to me was Vaughn, and I should have killed him because people like Vaughn don't deserve to live. And she's like, she's about ready to bust open Ephra's skull when Maya throws open the cliffside door and is like, stop, don't kill him. He's always been an idiot. And basically admits, like, he's asking about your magic because we need you to raise the fortress. And Sylvia's like, what? That's your plan? Me raise the fortress? And Maya's like, yeah, that's one of our 2 plans. Either you're going to raise the fortress with your magic, like that's our last case scenario, but like hopefully before that we're gonna go to a mall and have the grandma, Sylvia's grandma, I guess she's still the queen, declare you as heir, because like you are the heir, Imra's daughter, right? Because right now Felix, her cousin, right? So her dad's brother's son is the current heir. So Sylvia's just like, that's a stupid idea. Like, have you seen that woman lately? Because during the trials, she saw the queen and was like, man, this woman's basically comatose, which like, I don't blame her. She lost her husband and her son and almost her own life and stuff sucks. But they're like, well, we want to try that first because if you become the heir of Amal, you're going to have their army. And so Sylvia's just kind of like, that's a stupid ass plan, but it's better than the fortress thing. So I guess I'll go with that. And basically demands to go see Nimsa, but Ephra doesn't want to let her. Maya is like, well, we wanted to wait until you adjusted first. And they decide to go to this like meeting group that the leaders of the Urabi have. I just feel like Sylvia in these last few chapters just keeps saying stuff like, I have no intention of leaving, but then like all she can think about is leaving. Which, yeah, okay, that's trauma. But I would expect once she's made a decision for her actions after that to be more consistent, unless she's in a time of strife, stress, whatever. Versus, I mean, for these 4 chapters, she's kind of the same emotionally, other than when the monster thing happened. But it's like, if you decided at the beginning, I'm going to stay, and nothing changes stress level wise, Why do you keep, I don't know. That's me being nitpicking. Obviously, she's super traumatized. Another thing that I'm not really liking is that she keeps saying stuff like, I'm not a natural leader. I'll have to fight my instincts every step of the way. Not like Aaron or something. And it's like, for the rest of the book, all she does is follow her instincts. She never stops and thinks about anything from a like leader perspective. What's the best thing to do for these people now type thing. She's just like working off of her emotions. Like, oh my God, I learned X information. Therefore, Y. And so for her to be like, I have to fight my instincts to be a good leader, she never does that. But people still are fawning over her anyways. Like, yeah, I can get it. The people who don't know her, who see her and think, oh my God, that's the heir to our kingdom. But for Namsa and Maya and Ephra and then the other people who are like in charge of the Urabi, why would they see anything she's doing and think, what a great leader? When it's obvious, like that's what they're thinking about her, but she doesn't actually do anything that makes a good leader. I don't know. This is kind of like my issue I had with The Knight and the Moth, when they're like, you're such a good knight. And it's like, I don't know anything about being a good knight because all you've told me in this story is that good knights socially are rich white men. Like, okay. So like, if your definition of a good knight is rich white guy, this dude, who is neither of those things, wouldn't be a good knight. Like, I need more actual information about like what you think a good knight is. Chivalrous, good at planning, great with the sword, something, right? So it's like Sylvia just says, I'm not a good leader, but then everyone around her is like, you're a great leader, even though she's never actually doing anything for her people. Like, she's doing it for her people, but really her motivations are all completely selfish, and she's pretty open about that. The next two chapters are from Sappha's point of view. After she was transported by Sylvia's magic, she woke up in the Ivory Palace or near the Ivory Palace. And so to survive over the last week-ish that has passed, she basically became arm candy for a rich old guy. Easy job, I guess. And obviously, you know, given her past, she really hates this. And it's also obviously really demeaning. Like, he won't even let her eat unless he's feeding her, that sort of thing. So she finally has had enough. She's starving. So she decides to sneak out and eat in a corner somewhere, basically, because she also wants to leave the Ivory Palace and try to find Marek, but she has no idea where he would be. She manages to secure some food. She sneaks out to scarf it down in a hallway somewhere where she accidentally stumbles upon two men planning Sultana Vida's murder, assassination, death. And instead of fleeing or anything, as Sylvia would be wont to do, Sappha decides to go warn Vida. So she storms into Vida's room. She goes into Vida's room and tells her, hey, I just heard these people planning to assassinate you. And Vida, of course, is like, and you're not one of them. Sappha like convinces her, like, no, I'm an idiot here to help you. And she pulls Vida into one of her wardrobes to hide from an intruder coming into the room. Sappha steps out and convinces him that she is a maid secretly there to try fancy rich people clothes, and convinces him to leave, that Vida's down the hall taking a bath or something. And so she successfully saves Vida's life. And to Sappha's great surprise, Vida thanks her by offering her a job. She says that she needs someone there to keep an eye on things, let her know what's going on around the palace. And at first, Sappha is like, no, you don't want me. But eventually, Vida promises her, I think you're looking for someone, and if you help me, I will help you. So Sappha agrees to work for Vida, provided Vida pays her to look for Marek on her own, not to look for Marek herself, obviously, for reasons. Sappha doesn't want Vida to know who Marek is or anything. The next chapter jumps back to Aaron, who is in a council meeting in that war hall he talked about in the last book, with all the important politicians, I guess, from Nizal there, talking about what to do. Obviously, with Sylvia's reveal, all the other countries are now militarizing. There's a lot of stress. People don't know what to do, really. Everyone's really suspicious of everyone else. Aaron notes that since he has become the commander, he has been slowly replacing the people he can with his own people. So there are some people in the room on his side, but many of the people are still on his father's side. And there's one guy who is super annoying and always like really opposed to anything Aaron suggests. So Aaron hates this guy. And this guy is like the main one advocating for the lower villages to have their conscription rate ramped up, right? So he wants the poor people joining the military. He also wants to get rid of the military's trained in like a series of camps, and he wants to get rid of some of the middle ones so people are done faster, which obviously it's a bad idea. So Aaron is having to like fight this guy basically, and everyone else's stupid choices, which is super stressful for him. And at this point, he's kind of concerned because there is something called the Natreus vote, which means if the council has lost faith in the commander, they can vote to veto his decision. Otherwise, his decisions are top of the pyramid. So obviously Aaron doesn't want this to happen because then they would be kicking him out. Since they can't really come to a consensus, they decide to meet again later. So Aaron is walking with one of his people, this woman who has a huge crush on him, which I thought this subplot was super unnecessary. I don't know. But he is walking with her through the garden on to their next thing they're going to, because the person had questions to ask him. And as they're walking through the gardens, he sees Sylvia at a distance. And he's like, I'm hallucinating. I'm crazy. This can't be real. And he asks his companion, like, hey, look over there. What do you see? And she does not see Sylvia. So he's like, that's it. I've gone insane. But of course, his first reaction when he sees her is to grab his knife and start thinking about how fast it would take to restrain her, where the guards would come from, what they would need to capture her, etc. Obviously, because she has magic. And that's when he asks Layla, like, hey, can you see her? No? Oh, sorry, I'm just really tired. And the chapter ends with him being like, oh my gosh, my first instinct was to yell for her to run. And I'm like, that literally wasn't your first instinct, dude. Like, you literally grabbed your knife to stab her first or throw it at her or whatever. Like, you grabbed a weapon first and you're trying to gaslight me that your first reaction was to tell her to run. Like, no, I don't. Okay. He, carries on to his next meeting, which is with a blacksmith because he is having a bunch of weapons commissioned with a specific symbol carved into them. It doesn't really talk about why that symbol's being put on the weapons, but he does think about how he's going to need all of these if it does come to war with any of the other countries. He's thinking Lakub since it's the closest to Nizal, according to the map. But he kind of cites it as Vida being the most aggressive of the other three monarchs. So he's hoping he doesn't have to use them, but just in case, he's been, ever since he got back from that first explosion with Sylvia, he has been having these commissioned. So then we hop back to Sylvia, and she is with the Urabi, where she learns that they are planning / are in the process of releasing all of those monsters that were used in Dar al-Mansi, the second trial. So it was the abandoned town where they released a bunch of monsters and she had to have 3 trophies. They're using those extra monsters that they still had, and they keep them stored under a village in like an underground prison. But the Urabi have sent people over to go unlock all those cages and release the monsters. So she's horrified because it's under a lower village, not even like a military compound or something. So it's like going to kill a bunch of civilians. And the Urabi are kind of like, all's fair in love and war. But she's pissed because she's like, if you do this, like, Aaron can't ignore this. Like, this is a direct attack against him and he is going to have to react. And they're like, no, there are all these laws that people can't do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, Have you read them? Because literally there are provisions stating if they're at war, if something horrible happens, they can just ignore them and protect themselves. Like, and this is one of those horrible situations where giant monsters are attacking the populace. So she demands, like, they're going to hold a meeting to discuss anything, any future decisions, which I guess is like her kind of like stepping forward to be a leader, but she still never does anything. She just insults them all the time. And after that, she goes to confront Ephra because since she almost killed him, but she realizes that he didn't fight back. And Maya had mentioned, like, oh, well, he didn't, I'm surprised he didn't use his magic to stop you. So Sylvia's like, his magic can stop me? Sure. So she confronts Ephra, and he's basically like, you should be asking why I wouldn't use my magic on you. And she's like, what? No, just tell me what your magic is. So he reveals that his magic is the manipulation of emotions. So he uses it on her several times. He makes her really sad, makes her really angry. I don't know, a variation of those two emotions because that's kind of all she feels. And unfortunately, it unlocks this like psycho part of her. So this happens repeatedly in the story. And it's one of my big complaints. I don't think it's done very well because she's having strong feelings and then her feelings die while this is happening. And then she has strong feelings again, but she's like, oh my gosh, my feelings are dying. Like I can't control them anymore. Like what's going on with me? But it's like all you do is talk about your feelings. And even when you're this like crazy psychopath version, you have really strong feelings. You're just mean. Like the whole time in this scene while she's this psycho version of herself, she's like, oh, that, you know, just thinking bad stuff about Ephra, like he's the one who threatened me and he'll get what's coming to him, stuff like that. So it doesn't really feel like she's actually emotionless, like she's saying. I don't know. And it also like while she's this other person, she has all these like she keeps seeing weird things with different people doing bad stuff, like killing cats and yada yada. But she doesn't have really any other thoughts other than just like observing what's going on around her or having these memories. But then, like, after this one, she's like, I was looking for something. And I was like, when? When were you looking for something? Because that wasn't in that whole page. I don't, okay. But obviously, Ephra is horrified by this happening. And so but Sylvia just brushes it off, kind of like, you're exaggerating. Like, I wasn't actually that weird or different. Like it was just a brief lapse in my judgment because you were manipulating me. And that's kind of the end of the scene. We then jumped for the first time to Marek, who he woke up inside a Nizalan military training compound. So it is funny. Earlier, Sylvia's like, where would I have sent them? I would have sent them home probably. I hope they're in Maher, our hometown. But really, she sent them back to where they would have been if their life hadn't been derailed, kind of. Because Sefa is half Lacubian, and Marek was supposed to join the Nizalan military. But does anyone have any introspection about this? No. So he wakes up in that compound, and he's been trying to escape this whole time, but obviously it's under guard because they have to conscript people. So he hasn't been able to escape, but he's luckily been able to kind of slide under the radar due to his military family background. One day, he finds out that one of Aaron's right-hand men, so his like 4 top guys, Vaughn, Wes, Jeru, and then the one who died in the last book. Obviously, if it's Vaughn, that's bad news because Vaughn hates his guts. But he decides to hide to make sure he doesn't run into them. Unfortunately, he does not know that during these inspections, bedroom doors are supposed to be left open. So he runs into a bedroom, shuts the door, hides under the bed, and the guardsman knows that's suspicious, so he waits outside the door after making it seem like he left. And so Marek is like, this is my chance, I'm gonna run away, and runs right into the guardsman, and it's Jeru, the nice one. So Jeru is horrified. He's like, why are you here? Here of all places. And Marek is like, I didn't really have a choice. This is just where I woke up. And I've been stuck. And so Jeru's like, shit, I don't know. Like, do you know where Sefa is? And Marek's like, no, do you know where Sefa is? And Jeru's basically like, yeah, Aaron wants me to take you back to the capital, which isn't great news. He'll probably kill you. And so Marek freaks out, like, do you have Sepha? And Jerry was like, no, I just told you I don't have her. Because basically Marek's like, if Sepha learns that she's being used against Sylvia, she'd probably kill herself to save Sylvia. So Marek's having a panic attack, and Jerry was basically like, look, I don't want you to die either. So let's make a deal. I need you to go hunt down this artifact, and if you do, I will help you find Sepha. I kind of felt like this whole plot line is weird because he tells him what the artifact is, where the artifact is, despite acting like no one's seen it in 100 years. Then why do you know where it is? Why? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. This didn't really feel like Marek was doing anything. It felt kind of like a cop-out to have this object appear. But I will say Marek's chapters are super funny. They're the funniest part of the book. I love Marek's personality. And Sepha too. Like, Sepha's chapters are really funny, but they're all just kind of lacking in meat. Like, they're flimsy. I don't know. So we then flash forward to Aaron again. He is supposed to be having dinner with his father, but he is not super excited about it for obvious reasons. And so he's like kind of wandering through the garden, hoping to postpone things, but he goes to visit his mother's kind of memorial statue. And he like tells her about some of the stuff that's been happening vaguely, but obviously it's a statue, and he's like he's not like super emotional like that. So he's like finally like, okay, I'm gonna go, but he hears some rustling and is suspicious because none of the servants come out here because they think it's creepy. And he goes around a corner and he finds, guess who? Sylvia. And of course they're like wrestling, and he's like, why are you here? Still thinking he's imagining her when she pins him against a statue and is like, hey, you need to evacuate Ganem's Bend. So that is where the Urabi are unlocking the monsters. And he is basically doesn't believe her, but they get interrupted by Wes, one of his other guardsmen. And so Sylvia disappears. He's talking to Wes. So Wes has come to follow Aaron, basically to confront him, to be like, Jeru was saying that maybe you need to talk about something and like you're emotionally constipated. And Aaron blows him off like, yeah, Jeru's a weirdo with family, so no, I don't want to talk about anything. And they proceed to start walking back towards the dinner after Wes is like, yeah, sorry, boss. As they're about to enter the dinner with his father, the like castle alarm system starts going off. And the last time this went off was when Sylvia blew up a building. And before that, it hadn't gone off for 2 decades. So of course, everyone's freaking out. Like, what can be, what else is happening? And that's when he learns about the monsters being released. And he's like, oh my God, evacuate Ganem's Bend. She was telling the truth. And so Rowan appears and is like, Aaron, go into hiding. Like, we need to protect you as the heir. And Aaron's like, do you think I'm weak? And he storms to the stables, finds his horse conveniently already saddled with the tack and stuff, which I'm like, they just leave his horse saddled? Why? Was he going to be riding his horse later? I don't know. You shouldn't be leaving your horse like that. But anyways, he races out to the village to try and do what he can as his soldiers are gearing up behind him. Back with Sylvia, some of the Urabi visionists are conjuring up a vision for everyone to watch what's happening at Ganem's Bend. And of course, Sylvia's horrified because she's watching these monsters come out of the underground prison to attack civilians, and all the Urabi are just kind of like, yeah, serves them right. Which, okay, super sympathetic people there. And she realizes they unlocked all the monsters. So like there's that really horrible shapeshifter that eats magic. She's like, you basically unlocked, like, I forgot what she said, but like a metal detector for us. He's just gonna zoom straight for us. We're the only people with magic here. And then they also released the Al-Ankha, however, I'm bad at this, but it's the big bird made out of glass or something that was just like so horrible and is the reason Dawood died. So she's really upset, like, I can't believe you released these. And the Urabi are kind of like, well, they captured them after Daralmansi anyways, like they can capture them again, we just need the distraction. And yeah, of course, Aaron charges in. Sylvia's distraught because there's no army behind him, it's just him by himself. He starts kicking butt. He fights the bird, climbs it with his knife, kills it in the sky by sucking its magic out of its body. and they crash to the ground. But of course, he's been like sliced open by the bird claws, and he's super injured. And she's just like, oh my God, he's going to die. And then there's a Nisnas, some sort of monster behind him, and he's not looking. So she's like, look behind you, look behind you. And he manages to hear her through their like magical connection. And so he turns and stops the monster. But then, of course, everyone's horrified because he turned and looked at them. And so the visionists lose their magic, and boop, the vision ends. So of course everyone's like, oh my God, like did he see us? Because we know he has weird powers. Like, that's freaky that he looked at us. But Ephra stands up and he's like, no, he's always been sensitive to magic. That's probably what he sensed. Like, he probably didn't see us. That's impossible. But this is the reason, like, we've never looked at him before, because we had this suspicion already. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And they leave. After which point, Ephra's like, you know that's a lie. Back to Sylvia and the other in-group. Like, you know that's a lie. Like, you were doing a portal or something. That's why he came. Like, I heard you whispering. And Sylvia's like, I didn't do anything. How dare you? But they talk him down, and they're like, he's just weird. Let's go to our meeting. So they head to the council meeting where they discuss what happened with Ghanim's Bend. And of course, Sylvia's like, I'm pissed. Y'all make bad decisions. Why should I even listen to you guys? Like, are you just planning to hurt people? And they're like, no. Like, we're just trying to do this as fast as possible. Our next plan is for you to go to a mall and talk to Queen Hanin, your grandmother. And Sylvia doesn't think that's going to work. She's like, that lady, is comatose, basically. And even if she isn't, why would she choose me, some rando she's never met, over her family that she raised? During this meeting, they reveal to her some documents that Dawood actually saved from before, like at the beginning of all of this, like 10 years ago. And these documents are, dun dun dun, written by Marek's older brother, the one who was chosen for a special mission and then mysteriously died and was never seen again. So he did some research, investigative stuff while all this was going down, and he discovered that the fortress fell before the messenger did. So the messenger that went to the Blood Summit, which implies that the fortress wasn't broken down by people. It must have happened because of something, right? Not... Okay, so people think that the fortress fell because Sylvia's grandparents were so upset their daughter, Sylvia's mother, was murdered, that their magic went crazy and destroyed the fortress because it was like intrinsic to it or something. But these documents reveal that no, the fortress was already down. It couldn't have been Sylvia's grandparents. So like that kind of just like connects all the dots that no, Sylvia's grandparents weren't responsible for the Blood Summit, even though they were horrible people otherwise. So we're back to Aaron, who is being bandaged up, or bandaging himself up, after Ghanim's Bend is resolved. And he's basically like, his political rival guy who has all the bad decisions is psyched because he's like, finally, we can do what I want to do. And Aaron just is kind of like, yeah, it would be suspicious if it weren't obvious that magic was responsible for this, because otherwise I think it was you. But he's in his room bandaging himself up by himself, being moody because he doesn't want to take resources from other people. And he ends up passing out from blood loss. Sylvia, after her meeting, has gone back to her room and freaked out because she's found even more shiny gold veins on her body, gold and silver. And while she's freaking out, she is transported to Aaron's room, where she finds him passed out from blood loss. And he kind of comes conscious when he senses her, and they start fighting. She's stabbing him in his wounds with her elbow, and they're wrestling, but he won't talk to her except when she says, I don't want to hurt you, you're bleeding. And he's like, don't want to hurt me, like, haha, you bitch. Doesn't say anything else after that. And she's basically like, why are you fighting me? Like, why don't you believe me? Like, one lie ruined our relationship, basically, but one lie isn't ruining your relationship with your dad. Like, you should ask your dad all these questions because the messenger, or the fortress fell before the messenger did. And then the vision starts ending, and she's like, I see the cogs turning in his head. Like, I know when he's curious about something. So she's hoping that he's going to like start investigating to like find out the truth, which is just kind of funny because this whole time, like, he hasn't liked his dad. And I haven't gotten the impression that he thinks his dad's a truthful person. But this is like all of their arguments. Sylvia trying to be like, your dad sucks. Like, stop listening to him. And it's like, oh, okay, whatever. The next day, Sepha, back in the Ivory Palace, goes to the kitchen, her first day on the job working for the Sultana, and tries to bring her breakfast. But the kitchen staff play a prank on her, and it turns out that the Sultana doesn't eat breakfast, and she doesn't wake up before noon. So Sepha walks in on her and a lover getting at it, and obviously he's horrified. Spills food all over the white rug, and Vida dismisses the man and is basically like, you need to toughen up because they sense weakness. They smell blood in the water, and that's why they played that prank on you. And they have like some back and forth banter where basically Vida's like, I think you're lying and you shouldn't lie to me. Which Sepha's like, I would never lie to you. Like, you know, of course I respect you, but you're just like a poisonous flower. So who knows? Like when you'll sting me or something. Then Vida warns her, like, you're too kind-hearted. Like, you need to harden your heart in this palace. Otherwise, people are just always going to take advantage of you. And that's the end of the chapter. So it's like nothing happened in this chapter. Just them talking. And it's like, yeah, I guess it's supposed to be hints about something, but I don't know. I didn't really feel like it moved the plot forward any. Regardless, we're back to Aaron, who has learned that the Mufsid that were captured at the end of the last book are going to be executed. And he's like, this is so weird. Like, why are they being executed so fast? Because your dad wants to hide something. And he's like, I'm going to go question them. He visits every day to suck out their magic anyways. So he's like, I'm going to go back and see what I can learn. And he's talking to like the kind of the leader of the Mufsid, who reveals that he is a bone spinner, or a Jasadi whose magic is specially able to pull memories from bones and then share those memories with other people. And so Aaron kind of makes a deal with him, like, you're going to tell me what you know and I will leave your magic and everyone else's magic intact. That way you have at least a glimmer of hope during the execution. Spoiler alert, they all get executed anyways. But the leader's like, okay, fine, I'll show you all these visions. And he shows Aaron visions of magic mining and like what that really was and what it meant. He also shows visions of Sylvia's mother, Sylvia's grandparents, Sylvia being abused by Hanim, and then I guess her name's Hanem, but then that sounds just like Hanan. So I'm gonna go with Hanim. And yeah, so he's seeing all these visions and he's just like, oh my god, Sylvia's life is just so tough. But unfortunately the guy's magic runs out, and so Aaron doesn't get any more visions, but he's learned like maybe what Sylvia's been telling me is true. Like the magic mining was real. And, you know, in the one vision was Vida's mother. So it's like, it was more than just Sylvia's grandparents doing this. It was, you know, like a widespread conspiracy. We're back with Sylvia, and she'd been confronted by Ephra on the cliff, who's basically like, this is enough. Like, you need to show us your magic because it's super suspicious you're not using it, and we need to know what you're capable of. So Sylvia is like, fine, what do you want me to do? And Ephra basically tries to convince her, like, make a Kitmer, which I realized in my last video, I described it as a cat with wings, because there were definitely descriptions that made me believe it was a cat with wings. It's a griffin, hence the cover, with horns, which aren't on the cover. And she tries to summon the Kitmer. She has another one of her weird psycho visions. And when she comes to, she's surrounded by like magical fog and everything's shaking and everyone's like, oh my god. And then a baby Kitmer appears. So Ephra's pissed. Everyone else thinks it's so funny that this cute little baby Kitmer appeared out of nowhere. And Ephra starts taunting her again. So Sylvia has the baby Kitmer, and several baby Kitmers appear and carry him off over the water to torture him a little bit, and everyone thinks it's so funny. And Namsa like tries to like kind of, I don't know, not reconcile, but she's like trying to pump Sylvia up a little bit, and it's just like, yeah, I know your life's been hard, and you know, we've been treated you badly. You've been treated badly for a decade, really, and we're sorry we lied about some stuff, but like, you're our leader and we just really want our kingdom back, and you should want the kingdom back too. And basically is like, Sylvia knows, like, she's like, well, okay, if you want me to rebuild the fortress, the last person who built the fortress burned up to a crisp. So like, you're asking me to walk to my death. And Namsa, for some reason, is like, no, I think you're going to be the one who survives. Like, Kaida Hind, like, she burned up, but like, you're going to make it. Zero basis for this reasoning, but they then go on because a messenger arrives in the interim and they decide to hold a feast because it's like, everything's going to shit anyways. But they're just having their little party and she's just like worried because all of this is stacking up. The monsters, what's happening in Omal, Lukub is taking over the forest, Orban has shut down its borders, so no trading route. So it's like, we're calling these Jasadis to return to Jasad, and like, where are they going to go? Like, they have no road, essentially. And everyone's trying to like, you know, assuage her, and they bring up the Mariah again, which is like a magical part of SM Force that like transports around. Okay, apparently this is what Vida's hunting for, but everyone else just treats it as like magical land that pops around places. So they're like, well, the Mariah will find them. Like, you know, of course it's gonna, like with like, magic protects magic type thing. And they decide a small patrol is going to go to the Amalian castle to try and convince Queen Hanan to accept Sylvia as the heir. Meanwhile, well, after this, Sylvia goes back to her room and she starts counting all of these golden veins on her body, conveniently stark naked. And of course, she's freaking out over all of these veins when, dun dun dun, she starts getting sucked into another vision apparition transport thing. So she shows up with just her blanket in front of Aaron. Okay, it's the next day, but the next chapter, we're back to Safa, and she goes on kind of like a nighttime excursion with Vida and finds out, since Vida brought her to this meeting, that Vida is actually using a half Jasadi man to track magic trails in order to find the Miraya, which is the magical part of the woods that jumps around. Like, I guess the info that she's using magic to find magic is the new info, but we already knew she was doing this. Vida basically kind of threatens Sepha, sort of like, do you want me to fix your problem? Because everyone at court hates Sepha, obviously, because this new girl swooped in and got a cushy job to their eyes. And Sepha says, no, I'll handle it. And then Vida tells her, you're just really bad at lying. I don't know. Like, I really love Sepha's point of view, and all of the chapters from her have this great voice, but then nothing happens in her chapters. So back to Sylvia. Since she was upset, she transported to Aaron, and she is still naked from the last scene, wrapped in a blanket, but she's hiding behind a tree, watching Aaron and his father talk about the Movesid, who are still captured. Well, they were just executed that morning. And so Rowan is kind of like, I heard you visited them last night, and weirdly enough, they had magic. And Aaron kind of brushes it off like, I still have head trauma, before his dad kind of like basically threatens Aaron by saying, everyone's threatening each other in these chapters, that if he like goes off script basically for their plan that's happening and gets hurt or killed or something, then he will kill any soldier who allowed him to do that, which, great parenting. Aaron then, after Rowan leaves, he confronts Wes and is basically like, hey, I'm going to ask you to do something, but if you're not 100% committed to it, tell me no. And Wes agrees. Aaron wants him to follow his father to try and find out where the mind magic was stored. So all the magic that Sylvia's grandparents had been collecting and then distributing to the other royals, like where did it get left? Because he hasn't been able to find anything in all of his giant map collections. Sylvia is still hiding behind the tree, thinking like, oh, well, she watches Aaron leave and is like, wow, that's crazy. Like, I guess he sort of believed me. He's finding out information. Cool. When Aaron pops up from behind her, and it's basically just an entire chapter of them making sex jokes. I don't know. And his immediate thought is, like, I guess the implication is she's supposed to have been crying or something, but that's not really specified. It's just saying that she's like anxious about seeing all these veins appear. But his first thought is like, you're naked in a blanket, like, who hurt you? You know? And she's like, oh, it must be because of like of my attitude, like how I look right now, like just upset about everything. And I know it's a thing. I know it's a thing that people love, but I don't think it's really consistent narratively. That's just me. We then go forward to Marek, who he was actually at Ghanim's Bend fighting as a soldier. And afterwards, since they're far away from their camp, they are given quarter in noble houses. So they're in one of the upper towns, and the rich people open their doors to let the soldiers in. And he conveniently, per Jeru's finagling, gets put into the house that Jero wanted him to find that heirloom object button thing in. And of course, Marek swoops in, doesn't realize he's even in the house. Jero told him to go investigate, starts flirting it up with the daughter and the mother, who's clearly married. And then he sleeps with her and is like, oh, yep, this is the house. I gotta find the stuff. And then that's when the chapter ends. So we go back to Sylvia, who is now gloating because they're leaving the mountains through that waterfall she found earlier. And this was another thing I didn't really get. Like, they're going to go through this river because that's like the safest way out of the mountain that's like secretive for them, using giant alligators. And so they have one of the other Urabi who can control animals, like steer the alligators up this river. And for some reason, Sylvia just like flips out. She flips out. And I just didn't really think it was consistent with her character at all, because she's fighting these monsters that are even worse than the giant alligators. Doesn't even really flinch at it. But now all of a sudden she's like terrified of this alligator. I feel like I would have believed this scene more if previously, when she's fighting these monsters, she was actually afraid instead of she was afraid of losing the fight, but she wasn't afraid of the creature, really. Like, that vibe wasn't transmitted to me as a reader in any of her previous fight scenes with monsters. You know, I don't know. Like, I feel like she would have had some sort of thought while fighting some of the monsters, like, oh my god, the scale's so creepy, this gross monster's trying to kill me, like, So they take the alligators through the river, they keep traveling, blah blah blah. It's been hours. They're traveling under the desert flats through this river because apparently Rovial at some point buried the river under the desert to punish the Awala of Orban. And Capostra, Dania, I mixed them up. And again, this just isn't consistent with the map at all, because all the countries basically have the river on their border, and it goes off the map in two directions. Well, the map is retconned for this book. Now there's an ocean. So it goes into the ocean on one side, then off the map on the other. I'm just like, where is the underground river? It would have made more sense because they talk about Rovial also dragging the river out towards Jasad. I don't know. But after they exit the river, Sylvia overhears them talking about the plan because they're on their way to the Amalian castle to talk to Queen Hanan, right? But she overhears them talking about how Felix is going around raising all of the lower villages and that they predict Maher is next. And I was just kind of confused because like they're arguing about it, like, we can't do it. We need to finish our plan or everything's lost. And, Sylvia's obviously upset. And that's when Ephra implies like, well, you always run away from a fight, so I didn't think you'd care. And then Sylvia's pissed and basically like, oh, y'all have no qualms about asking me to sacrifice myself for you guys. But then she just leaves the thread hanging until Namsa stands up and is like, ask us to fight for you. And Sylvia's like, fight for me. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's go to Maher. I was just like, what? Like, I feel like Sylvia should have gone further and started talking about how, like, she does before this, earlier in the chapter, after she finds out, like, they matter to me. Like, I think they're important. But then she never, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a logical conversation. But they go to Maher and they sneak in and find the whole place locked down. Basically, Pharrell is a lookout and she like sets off an alarm, but then realizes it's Sylvia, and so everyone comes out to greet them. And that's when everyone kind of connects the dots, like, oh my god, she's a Jasadi, and then oh my god, she's the Malika Isaiah. Sylvia's pulled aside by Rory, her apprentice, or like she was his apprentice in the first book. And he's basically like, hey, I found this thing after you left, and if I'd known I had it, I would have given it to you before all of this. And he gives her a journal from her father revealing that he actually worked at the Omalian court and like was there when her father was born and taught him his whole life and was there when he died. And so she's just like totally flabbergasted by this realization, but then goes on a weird tirade about how she's nobody's daughter. So Sylvia goes to the keep where she had been living and with everyone else to like prepare for the next day because they're pretty sure the soldiers are like going to arrive tomorrow to fight them, the Malian soldiers. And so she's like going through her dad's notebook, and the last page talks about how he's worried about her. Like he knows that she's going to have this great power, and he names several individuals like, please save my daughter, take her away from that place. Like my wife and I and Fran, like she also like take them, save them, please. He also explains that within 2 generations, the Jasadi's magic will be gone. And he said within 2 generations. So it's like, it's been 20 years since he wrote this. So that's generally what people consider 1 generation. So I'm like, why aren't we actually seeing the magic disappear at this point? But he was basically saying Sylvia's grandparents knew this, and that's why they were magic mining so fiercely in the lower villages. So they would have a backstore of magic to keep the fortress running, specifically because Aaron is some sort of threat. The letter goes on and on about how the Nazalan heir is some sort of horrible thing, but he doesn't say what, and that like he will destroy them if they let him. But Sylvia's grandparents were like, well, if we just store enough magic to keep up the fortress, like we don't have to worry about it. He's going to die eventually in like 60, 70 years, and we should be able to hold out that long, which, okay, I guess we'll get back to this. I don't really feel like this was ever finished, but yeah. Sylvia has a touching moment with Raya, who was like her foster mom, and they go to sleep before the imminent battle. For some reason, it was decided that there should be a chapter of Sepha, basically just going on this like long-winded monologue about how Vida is both crazy and mean, but also nice and thoughtful, and how at the end of the day, Sepha thinks Vida's actually a kind person. But then everything she describes, it's like, it doesn't add up to kind to me, but that's fine. So we cut back to Sylvia, who now is in the middle of this battle. And I feel like this is a huge disservice to the plot because everyone's always talking about how she's such a good leader. And she's like, in this chapter, she's like, oh, what if my plan fails? And it's like, I don't even know what your plan is. Like, I should see you orchestrating with the other people who's doing what, when, where, why, how, to show me that you are a good leader, that you do have leadership qualities. Like, we don't actually see any of that. We just jump to Sylvia cutting down people left and right. And essentially what's happening is that the Omalian soldiers come to Maher. They start fighting with the villagers and the Urabi when Aaron and his soldiers appear on the horizon. And again, I didn't really get this. Aaron's just sitting there waiting because the Nazalan army isn't supposed to intervene in anything unless it's a magical dispute. But the Urabi are throwing magic around left and right, fireballs, all sorts of stuff. But they just sit there and keep watching until Ephra uses his emotional manipulation to send some of the Omalian soldiers to attack the Nazalan army, which then opens up the Nazalan army to decimate the Omalians. Okay, like, There should have been a scene where Sylvia sees Aaron and tells all the Urabi, like, stop using visual magic, like visible. Stop using visible magic. Like, if they see the magic, they will come intervene. Keep it low key, guys. Doesn't happen. She just explains to them, like, oh no, he's not going to step in unless he's. There are laws about this. Like, I don't know. Felt like a missing puzzle piece there. Halfway through the battle, Raya apparently left the keep and gets seriously injured. And so Sylvia, sees people freaking out and goes over there and realizes, like, Raya's dead, dying. And she flips out and activates her magic to heal Raya, which is, like, totally unheard of, apparently. Like, considering that she was dead. And to me, this just felt a little too structured. Like, if her magic had just lost control, but instead Sylvia starts seeing all of those, like, weird ghost people that she's been imagining and starts seeing their memories, and they're talking to her like, do we claim her? Should we claim her? She'll be ours. Like, we can't undo this. And they just make it really ominous. And then there's, like, silver blood gushing everywhere, and then it gets sucked back into Raya's body, and Raya opens her eyes. She's healed, but her eyes are now gold and silver, like the Jasadis are when they use magic. Everyone else is super excited Raya's safe, but Rory's like, oh my god, that's suspicious AF. And that's it. We never get anything from this about Raya being adversely affected, despite what all these spirits are implying. And then Sylvia, for some reason, is just, like, really happy, like she's Gollum for a chapter. But the battle just keeps going on. One of the Urabi dies. It's like a whole thing when Aaron, after sending his soldiers to start fighting the Omalians, he goes to confront Sylvia. And they are just duking it out in the dirt, punching each other in the face and elbowing in the gut and kicking, and there's a knife flying around. And at first, the scene is kind of implying that this is, like, sort of erotic for them because they can't make skin contact. So, like, what he'd really want to be doing, he can't do. So they're just, like, getting as close as possible by beating the shit out of each other. Weird. So it's like, we just saw Sylvia murder multiple people. We just saw Aaron murder multiple people. They're fighting when an Omalian soldier sneaks up and throws a knife. Aaron throws Sylvia out of the way. The knife cuts him. He takes the knife, and then he just, like, guts the soldier right in front of her. And she's upset about it, like, scared, like, oh my god, I can't believe he did that. And it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't believe he did that? You also just killed a bunch of people. Like, and so the whole time she's, like, trying to argue, like, why are we fighting? Like, your father's lying to you. And it's like, Aaron knows he's lying. Y'all are fighting because this is, like, some sort of weird pseudo-erotic thing. And now you're like, why are we even doing this? Like, I don't know. The whole setup of this scene, this chapter, was just bizarre to me. And she's mad. She's like, so you eviscerated him over the nature of the attack? She scrubbed her forehead with the heels of her hands. You once taught me that the only true honor in the world lies with the dead, because survivors strike first and repent second. Like, am I stupid? What does that have to do with what just happened? He didn't strike first. The Omalian soldier struck first, and he reciprocated. So, like, what does this have to do with his honor? Anyways, still fighting, and finally, fed up, Sylvia activates her magic to attack Aaron. And obviously it doesn't affect him, but she pulls down the building around him and manages to keep him down. And he's kind of like, why are you doing this? And she's like, well, your army is going to come in once the battle's done and collect all of the Urabi. And, like, I brought them here. Like, I have to protect them. I have to save them. And he's like, well, we're not going to kill them or anything. But she's like, no, like, I know, based on our past history in the last book, that their number one goal is to protect you. You are number one. So if I take you out, they have to follow. And so she starts trying to knock him out, but it's like a joke between them that, like, his skull is so thick just to withstand her. So she's, like, wailing on him, smacking him in the face. Like, his whole face is just, like, messed up and bloody. I don't know. Until finally she knocks him out, but she thinks she almost killed him. And she calls her Kitmers. So she, at some point, she like created larger Kitmers, not just the babies that everyone laughed at. And so she calls two over and she puts Aaron on one and she gets on the other and they fly over the army where she's like, I got your air. Like, your commander, come at me. And they fly off towards the SM Woods and the soldiers are chasing them, leaving everyone else in Maher safe. Which, like, great. You know, I wouldn't have problems with this storyline necessarily. I think maybe Aaron should have played along and like faked being unconscious instead of me getting like 4 and 5 paragraphs of her just like steadily beating him to a pulp. Because also, like, the extent of his head damage, like, he has to have a concussion. And, you know, in the next chapter, they're going to go to sleep. It's like, he's not supposed to, who cares about medical science? But, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay. As they're flying over the SM Woods, the Kitmer start freaking out and they fall into the forest. But Aaron immediately knows, like, it's the Mariah because it, I guess, sucks in magic. And so Sylvia wakes up in the ocean, basically, or so it seems. And she, you know, crawls out of the surf and is coughing up all this water. She can't see Aaron, but they're like footsteps around. And she decides to like try and go look for him when she's stopped by a monster, the Dulhath, the one that transforms between different people's faces. And it kind of confronts her, like, and so Sylvia can't use her magic here for some reason. It's just saying that the Mariah makes your magic ineffective. And so the monster is basically like, I'll help you out of the forest, but when we get to the edge, you have to fight me with a knife and no magic. And Sylvia's just kind of like, that's a dumb decision. I don't know. Because she'll taste better if they leave the Mariah, which is why he's like even offering this. But she turns him down because she's like, no, like the last time I fought one of y'all out of here, you transformed into a giant monster. Like, no, thank you. I'm not going to repeat that experience. When the Dulhath, it's kind of implied like he calls them, but the zombie soldiers that were talked about from centuries ago, they are in the Mariah just like surviving. And so these like zombie cannibals race up on her and she's fighting them when Aaron appears out of nowhere, like, I've been looking for you. And they manage to kill all of these cannibal zombies. And I just didn't understand this whole scene. They're basically like, oh yeah, there's no magic. We can touch. So they kiss a little bit. And then he like is holding her and walking across the beach until they get in the woods. And then he drops her because all of a sudden it's super suspicious. And it was like, why did you even pick her up in the first place? Like, she's not injured that way. And they're kind of like thinking like, well, maybe we can climb to the trees and see the end of the Mariah. When the Rokelias, those giant magical lizards from, I think, Dania, one of the Awalas has a monster called the Rokelia that she kept. And they start racing at them. And so they're like running through the woods, trying to find a safety. And they find a little clearing with a date tree, which for some reason, Sylvia's like, this will be safe. This was a date tree, I said, as I had once crouched in a burning room and said, the Malik and Malik of Jasad were magic miners. Absolute, unequivocal. It burned. I glanced at Aaron, who was watching me with transparent concern. We're in Jasad? Or at least, what would eventually become Jasad. We're safe here, I insisted, drawing Aaron to the ground beside me. The Mariah wouldn't dare. And it's just kind of like, what? I don't know. Weird. So somehow they're still in the Mariah, but now it's Jasad, and so they stop because they're safe from all the monsters and stuff. And this is where they decide to consummate their relationship and then go to sleep. Why? Why was I just feel like it doesn't make any sense that this is what they chose to do. But afterwards, Sylvia wakes up and she uses her magic that is now activated because the Mariah dumped them off in the middle of the forest. Yeah, so she uses her magic to protect him and then she leaves him there alone. to carry on the plan the Urabi have. And so we cut back to Marek, who meets up with Jeru, and he gives him, I said button earlier, it was a cufflink. And he gives the cufflink to Jeru, like, hey, I did what you needed me to. And in thanks, Jeru reveals, like, hey, I think we know where Sepha is. She's actually in the Ivory Palace. So of course Marek is like, why in the world would she go there? Like, that's absolutely insane. How dangerous. But they're like, that's what we have. We think this is what's going on with her. And so Marek now is like, oh my God, how am I going to get over there and help her? Meanwhile, what the connection is. Like, I've reread this chapter several times trying to figure out like what this means. But so Marek gives Jeru the cufflink, and it's supposedly hundreds of years old from this one certain battle. And it says, what do you need with the cufflink? Livening up His Highness's uniform? Marek asked. With his imminent, and by the grace of the Aveline, permanent departure from the guardsman looming, Marek could afford a little curiosity. The cufflink crumpled beneath Jeru's tightening fist. Not exactly. How does a cufflink crumple? And then we cut to all the guardsmen watching, well, all the soldiers watching Jeru fight this section leader guy, because it's revealed that the section leader has been taking bribes from noble families, basically like stealing a poor child from the lower villages to replace their children in the conscription. So instead of letting your son fight in the war, you hide him for several years, and some poor kid has to go fight in his stead, assuming his identity. And so it's like, I'm assuming that's what the cufflink is for, to prove that the section leader has been taking these bribes. But how would 100-year-old cufflink in somebody else's house? Like, they're paying the section leader. The section leader should have stuff, you know? But anyways, Jeru and this guy fight because the guy claims the fortune by four, which is like an old justice method where they fight instead of go through the courts, because people didn't trust the courts, I guess, hundreds of years ago. And so they're fighting, and Marek is just sitting there like, oh my God, watching Jeru fight, and doesn't have his guardsman pin on anymore, which is like treasonous apparently. And as they're fighting, the other guy, Solor, like seems to have won. So he's like getting a little cocky when Jeru just slits his throat. But then he's like, so everyone's like, oh my God, he won. And then he salutes to Marek, and then down at Solor's body, and it was like, oh shit, like, you didn't know you killed him when you jammed your knife in his throat? And so we get a really short chapter back with Sepha, who realizes, because one of Vida's like little investigator men shows up, and she realizes this means they found the Mariah, which Sepha now knows, like, she's collected info that the ring was to control the Ruby Hounds, which we saw fake ones in the first book. So she connects the dots that, oh, Vida wants to go into the Mariah where all this untapped magic is, to summon Ruby Hounds and use them like as part of her army. And so Sepha's basically like, well, this is a death wish of mine. Like, I have to stop her no matter what. And I'm probably going to die because I'm not good at fighting like any of my friends are. But, you know, I have to do it. Great character development. But I'm like, why have we gotten 3 breadcrumbs of her storyline when this could have been fleshed out to fill probably half of this book? And so then we get to chapter 40 with Aaron. And so Aaron woke up, he was found by his soldiers, and he realizes that Sylvia left him a packet. She leaves him like a packet of those papers from before, from Binyur Lazur, who is Marek's older brother who died, the one who revealed the whole magic mining thing and like Hanim's like machinations at the time, blah, 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 with Rowan. And so he reads these letters, and he realizes, like, he connects these dots where he realizes that he is Hanim's son. His mother, who raised him, wasn't actually his mom, and that he is Haf Jasadi. Pretty crazy. I was like, whoa, great plot twist. I was not expecting that at all. We then cut back to Sylvia, who has just bloop, 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 materialized over at the Omalian Palace, where she sneaks in. She finds Hanan, her grandmother, and tries to like introduce herself and ask to make her heir, basically, when she realizes that Hanan's dead body has just been posed in the throne. And Felix jumps out of the shadows with his soldiers, and Sylvia realizes he's done this to frame her as their grandma's murderer. And so Sylvia is kind of like, well, yeah, I'm still losing my family. Sylvia starts fighting Felix's soldiers, and she makes it to Felix, kills him. Everyone's dead. And she summons her Kitmers back and tells them, like, in my voice, announce that I am now the heir of Amal. I'm the queen of Amal and the queen of Jasad. Tell the continent. And so the Kitmers fly out, radioing her voice over the land. They say it more eloquently than she does in the chapter, but we then cut back to Sepha, who is enacting her plan to stop Vida. She decides that she's going to chop off Vida's finger in order to steal that ring and run as far as she can. And unfortunately, Vida immediately catches on and is like, oh, you're so cute. Like, I've known who you are the whole time. I just kind of wanted to see what you do. But like, how dare you think you could beat me? And luckily, Vida like goes off on this long monologue, so Sepha uses the opportunity to just like slam a chair into her head, and she's then fighting Vida's body because that like spirit that possesses her, and is like, it is funny because the spirit that possesses her is basically like, usually I'd stop this, but also you've been chosen, so that's fine, I'll let you have it. And so Sepha successfully cuts off her finger, grabs it, and starts running. And as she's running outside, she gets outside and she runs smack into Marek and Jeru and some other soldiers who have just arrived at the Ivory Palace. Unfortunately, as that happens, the Kubian guardsmen grab Sepha and they're like, cut the ring out of her skirts and throw her in the pits. So now she's in those like starvation torture pits, which infuriates Marek. He's flipping out, like, I have to go get her out. But Jeru's holding him back, like, no, like you can't. Like, she's surrounded by guardsmen. You will die. She will die. We need to come up with a plan. And Marek, of course, doesn't want to wait, but they are interrupted. He's forced to wait because guess who's there now? Aaron. And he, basically kind of like insinuates that he knows Jeru betrayed him, but I must be stupid because I cannot figure out how he betrayed him other than taking off his stupid pin, which, like, really? But Aaron has Jeru and Marek arrested. Basically, everyone's trying to tell Aaron, like, you can't do anything, like, hands off of this situation. But he's like, no, we're already at war. So take the castle. Because right as he's making this decision, Kitmers fly over and they're like, and they say, people of Jasad, hear me now. I am Alika Isaiah, daughter of Nifran. This is a call to the children of Rovial, to those of us from the last kingdom of magic. Come home. The enemy cannot defeat us if we stand as one. Together, we are a fortress they cannot break. Which, like, she didn't say half of that to the Kitmer earlier, but that's fine. And so they take the castle. Marek goes to free Sepha, and the end of that chapter. Because we are back to Isaiah, who now has run from the Omalian Palace all the way to the Orbanian Palace, where she is confronting Sorn. So he's the heir of Orban. And if you remember, Dia from the last book, who fell into the coma during the last trial that Soraya hijacked, Sorn has been trying to find a cure for her because he's like low-key obsessed with her. And Sylvia's plan is that if they fix Dia, Sorn will keep open his trade routes and he will protect Jasadis on the trade routes under the guise of protecting travelers, which is like kind of like his obligation already, but he has shut down the trade routes earlier. So one of the Urabi manages to fix Dia, and while doing so, she's like going through all of Dia's memories, because since Soraya was showing Sylvia memories, the same thing's kind of happening to Dia. Dia is stuck in her memories, just walking around. they learn that like she's actually in love with Sorn. And Sorn is like, what? Why didn't she ever tell me that? And so when she wakes up, they have like a heart to heart moment. So I guess they're going to be a couple, and which was like actually cute. But they do get the promise that the trade routes will protect Jasadis as much as they're able to. And so she's flying from the Orban Palace over the Meridian Pass, where she sees Marek and Safa running through the desert. And she lands and saves them, basically. And they're like, yeah, Aaron told us to run this way for some reason, but we figured, you know, he knew something that we didn't. And of course, like, Sylvia saved them. They fly back to the mountain where everyone's celebrating because at least some of their plan worked. And you know, Safa, Marek, and Sylvia all catch up with one another about what's been going on. And so, like, that was really touching, you know, seeing their, like, friendships. We then cut to Aaron, who, from the Ivory Palace, returned back to the Citadel in Nizal, and he calls Vaughn to his room, where he reveals that he came home to find Wes's decapitated head on his table. And, you know, obviously Aaron had investigated the little head, and he found underneath Wes's tongue Vaughn's pin, which earlier briefly Aaron had been like, Vaughn, where's your pin? And Vaughn was like, oh no, it must have fallen off. So it's like, okay, yeah. And so it's like Wes did the thing again, like making sure people could find evidence of his killer as he knew he was dying. And so Aaron kills Vaughn in retribution and then tells Jeru that he needs to go meet with his father. He goes to meet his dad and he confronts him about everything. The Blood Summit being how his mother is Hanem, and how his dad's been lying to him and was like responsible for everything with Jasad, blah, blah, blah. And it's revealed that Aaron is actually a siphon. So when he's pulling magic from the people, the Jasadis, he is actually siphoning all of this magic to his dad. And so that it's kind of explained with one of the books about how Farid, like the first Nizalan guy, was created by the Awalin to also be a siphon, and how it's different than transferring magic or magic mining, because instead of like ripping the magic out of them, it's just like emptying the well, but the well can still refill, versus like destroying the spring of magic. Aaron has connected these dots on his own because that explanation was given to Sylvia. And he realizes that the magic is being sent to his dad's scepter that he's always carrying around. And I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's like described that the scepter goes between his hands and stuff. But in this chapter, the scepter is welded to a bracelet on his arm. And so Aaron just chops off his dad's hand and takes the scepter and leaves with Jeru after his dad's like, you would choose her over your own kingdom, over your own family? And Aaron's like, yes, I choose her. Talking about Sylvia. I don't know. I don't really like Sylvia. I like Safa, though. Anyways, Sylvia just feels so much less developed, like just like a little paper cutout being put into these scenes. And anyways, they are, you know, rowing up the Haroon to the mountains because Aaron knows they're in the mountains, but he doesn't know where. So he's like, they'll find me, but we're going to find her too. The next chapter is just like a series of like snippets of Sylvia like reliving memories, where it's revealed that Ephra has been drowning her in buckets to like wake her up when her magic goes out of control like this. Why we're just randomly introduced to this in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, because it's implied that it's been happening for a long time. After this, Maya bursts in and is like, oh my god, you'll never guess who showed up. It's the Silver Serpent, right? Your boyfriend. And Sylvia's like super upset. She's like, what is he planning? I don't know. And everyone's like, well, we've captured him. And she's like, you don't understand. Like, this dude is a genius. He has some sort of plan. What is it? Like, we can't trust him. But they've let him in, and she decides to meet them all, him and Jeru, with everyone else. And he basically tells them everything. And he's like, I'm here to help you. Here's the scepter. Here's what's been going on. Here's what I know. And here's what my dad would be doing right now. So y'all can like make some plans. And while they're searching him, Sylvia finds a photo in his jacket and it's Hanim. And she's like, why in the world do you have her photo? Obviously, it's like super suspicious. And he's kind of like, oh shit, I should have probably gotten rid of that. But like, I was like still emotionally dealing with the fact that like I'm an illegitimate child now. And he's like, so the letters you sent me like actually were probably more useful than you expected. Sylvia, of course, is confused. Like, what does that have to do with the portrait of Hanim? And he's like, well, you once asked me if my hair was black when I was a child. And she's like, yeah, you said it was until the Musrira cursed you. And he's like, no, not because of the Musrira, because I wouldn't have survived if he waited until I was 4. And she's kind of like, what in the world are you saying? And he's like, my mom was Hanim. And of course, Sylvia's like, oh my God, like connecting the dots, like the blue eyes and like the cheekbones. And she's like, how did I not see this before? And he's like, yeah, my dad was going to use me to take over the Jasad throne. Like that was Hanim's goal too. Like if she had the heir to the throne as her child, like she would be powerful. And part of that was, since I had magic, part of that was, making me into the siphon, because it has to be a Jasadi, like someone with magic, to become a siphon. And she's just kind of like, I can't deal with this. I'm going to be back later. So she leaves. And then a bunch of men come into the cell and beat Aaron to a pulp. She goes to like Maya and Namsa and is like, here's what he told me. Like all of it was true. Here's some more info. And they're just kind of like, what if he's lying? And she's like, he wouldn't lie to me. I don't know. So they decide to keep Aaron alive for now. But then Sylvia decides to go back and talk to Aaron again. But the guard is acting really suspicious, and she goes in and finds those 7 men just like beating the shit out of him. And so she immediately just like flips out and starts torturing them with her magic. But Aaron stops her and the men flee. And she's just like, why didn't you fight back? And so Aaron stops her and basically comforts her. She's like, I was resolved to A, never see you again, B, to die for my people. And then you waltz in here and now I'm all conflicted about it. And he's like, you're not going to die. And they kind of have a heartfelt moment. And then he passes out from blood loss. And so she takes him to her room while he recovers, and they're slowly like trying to heal him. And that's all fine and dandy, except eventually when he's conscious again, he wakes up from sleep and finds Ephra drowning Sylvia in the bucket. So he almost kills Ephra. And Ephra's like, why the fuck didn't you tell him about this? Like, I knew this would happen. And Aaron's just like, what do you... And of course, Aaron touching her, he thinks it's going to kill him. Because he's just like filled with that rage whenever he siphons her magic. And so he like tells Ephra, like, if I go crazy, like you need to slit my throat. But he manages to pull Sylvia back from the edge. And, she's just like, you're so crazy. And so now that, Sylvia has announced that she's the heir twice over, they decide they need to all evacuate the mountains and return to Jasad. The giant fish monster from earlier, the Sarik Ilma'a, shows up because basically Sylvia wanted to like show him off to Aaron. Like, you'll never guess what legendary monster I found. And they're talking to the Sarik, and the Sarik's like, oh yeah, I could transport all of you back to Jasad. Like, it would take me probably 2 days and however many people at a time to get all of you, but we can do it. And so they start busing people over to Jasad using the fish. And while all of this is going on, Aaron's actually being very helpful, giving them information. And he even like pledges his sword to her in front of everybody, which everyone's just like, oh my God, that's crazy. And she's loving it because she has everyone she loves there. And so they do a lot of planning that it's mostly just banter that we see. I don't really feel like we see any of their actual plans being discussed, but basically this is when all the Urabi reveal, like, yeah, it's super obvious that y'all are in love, like y'all need to tone it down. And Sylvia's upset because she's like, I thought I was hiding it well. But that night, the night before they start busing everyone over to Jasad, Aaron leaves a note for Sylvia and he breaks out of the mountain and leaves. So poor Sylvia wakes up and she's like super distraught about this because it's like he betrayed her, basically. Since Aaron escaped, they start walking back to the Citadel and immediately get arrested. And so everyone's just like, you're a traitor. Like, who in the world do you think you are? Blah, blah, blah. Aaron is locked back up in the capsule, which is this like, imagine the Chokey from Matilda, which his dad has locked him in several times. And it's mentioned his dad used that as punishment like his whole life. Eventually, he is released from the capsule by his right-hand woman, essentially, Layla, the one who's also like weirdly in love with him. And we just keep getting reminded about it. And she's like, oh my God, ruby hounds have been sighted. Like, nobody knows what to do. Like, we need you. And so he is like, no, I got it. I know exactly what to do. Is the council convened? Let's head over there. And so they go to the council meeting where basically everyone's freaking out, and Aaron, in a fit of whatever, political rival he had, Bayum, who always had the horrible plans, he throws him out the window and is basically like, if you don't make me king, then you're going to be chewed apart by the Ruby Hounds, and I can stop them, but why should I? And Layla's like, we're going to have an Atreus vote. It can be used to get rid of the commander, but can also be used to like bump him up a level in terms of power. So like you can vote to make him the king. And everyone's like rioting, like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And meanwhile, Ravain's like, no, don't listen to him. And it's a whole thing. I actually really liked this chapter, but they're like trying to say, Ravain's trying to convince everyone like, Aaron's lying. There's no way he would sacrifice these lower villages, and that's who's being attacked first. By the time they get to the Citadel, they're going to have decimated all these other people. But they hear the gates crashing down because there's like the 3 gates, and which doesn't make any sense based on the map again, because the lower villages are on the other side of the Citadel and the gates are all on the west side. But anyways, so everyone starts freaking out, knowing that the Ruby Hounds are right there. They can like literally see them coming. And so they vote for Aaron to become the king. And the guards at Aaron's command sweep away Ravain and lock him in the capsule this time. While the Urabi, all the Jasadis are now in Jasad, setting up camp, getting ready when they see a Nazalan army coming at them. Sylvia is using the little Kitmer to spy on the army as they get ready to fight them, and she walks out to the army and uses her Kitmer to just start decimating these soldiers. And this is kind of like where she like embraces like her identity as a Jasadi, really. She's like, you know, it wasn't because I was Asaya that like made me special and resilient. It's because I was from Jasad. And it was like, okay, that's a nice sentiment. I was liking that. Meanwhile, Aaron back at the castle is fighting the Ruby Hounds with all of those weapons that he had crafted earlier in the book with a special symbol, because it's the symbol from Vida's ring. And using a weapon with it on one of the Ruby Hounds actually inflicts damage. Otherwise, they're kind of like invincible. Like, imagine adamantium. Nobody can cut them unless they have a special symboled item or weapon. A special symboled weapon. And so, you know, they're shooting arrows, they're fighting with swords, and it's revealed that, like, yeah, he actually didn't sacrifice the lower villages. He already had soldiers over there fighting. So, good for him. And while he's fighting, he goes to confront Vida, and he's basically like, you know, he gets her down. He beats her down. She's dying. And he's basically like, hey, you know, in honor of our friendship, I'm going to give you 2 options. Either he's like, I can touch you and I can suck all of your magic out and everything will crumble. I'm going to take you to the dungeon where you'll be prosecuted for violating the Zinish Accord. And, you know, you'll lose everything, you'll die, and I'll have to bury you. Or I will drain all the magic, this curse that's on you, and I'll allow you to go home. You will sentence my father, and you know, you can be his judge and executioner. And she's just kind of like, I want his throne and his head, Aaron. And Aaron's like, no, I can't do that. And Aaron's like, please, Vida, like, you don't have to live like this. Like, we've talked before about how if we weren't born into these roles, like, what would we be? And like, take my hand and hopefully it's not too late. And like, by me pulling away the magic and the curse, you'll live. And he says, there's a fourth option, Vida, a future you choose, a future where no one will ever know if you died on this field or if you were pulled back into the Moriah, because your body will disappear with the hounds. A future you get to build in a realm as intelligent as you are, where your power is limited only by what you can imagine. And so finally, Vida's like, okay, take my hand, as like she like gives her dying breath. And so we don't know what happens with her. But I was like, I really liked that. Vida was such an interesting character too. So as Asaya is fighting all these Nazalan soldiers, so specifically these are the ones sent by Rowan, right? Not by Aaron. And so they're fighting. It's really horrible. Everyone's dying. Sepha and Marek are obviously upset because like Marek is like, I worked with some of these dudes. And Sepha, you know, is just her kind-hearted self. And Sylvia says something like, well, Marek asks like how many have died? And Sylvia said, I don't know. They will count the dead after Nusret Kamel. There's more dying to do tomorrow. And Sepha's super offended by this. Like, is this you or your magic talking? When I'm kind of like, that sounds like something totally normal, Sylvia would say. But Nusret Kamel is when the mists fall away from the bridge. And so they're going to use that to boost the fortress building for whatever reason. The next day, the fighting continues. And unfortunately, Marek is killed. But basically, and this is where I feel like Sylvia narration is faulty. Because I was a coward, I wanted Sepha to stay on the ground a little longer. I wanted her to spend more time dusting the pebbles embedded in her cheeks and fighting her dizziness. I wanted her to enjoy her last minute of peace. I wanted so much more for her than what was coming. I ran towards them, but I already knew. Sepha pushed to her elbows, rolling onto her knees with a pained whimper. When she screamed, I clapped my hand over my mouth. It was the kind of scream scraped from the very bottom of his soul, impossible to hear without experiencing a visceral urge to turn away. It turned your skin cold and clammy, forced your heart into your throat and your stomach to your feet. It was the kind of scream that time would never scrub from my memory. And then Marek's dying and Sepha's crying, and I could almost hear Marek's heart slow. I felt the effort it took for him to twist his lips into a smile for Sepha. I thought he might have been trying for a joke, perhaps a glib remark about Sepha's peripheral vision, or how blood actually improved his shirt. Whatever he might have said, it would have been for Sepha. It had always been for Sepha. And Sylvia just watches her try and save Marek, but it's not working. He was gone in less than a minute. My magic could fight back death, but it could not give chase once death had claimed its prize. I stopped in front of the pair, scepter clenched in my bloodless fist. The last Lazar gone. The man who never wanted to be a soldier, whose life had twined with Sepha's and never let go, dead on a battlefield like the rest of his siblings. And I don't know. Like, I guess the fact she didn't even try is indicative of like her downward spiral into unfeelingness. But that whole first part, like, I just feel like if her downward spiral happened, she might have like taken a step or two and then been like, it's too late anyways, and then watched Sepha try and save him, but watch him die, and then she just leaves without saying anything instead of walking over there and being like, oh, okay. But the mist falls at this time, and so Sylvia goes to the bridge, and she remembers that she actually, you know, the magic madness is actually Roviel's magic finding a new host, basically. So like they're the reincarnation of Roviel, the Awal of Jasad. So like she's a god, and she's like getting all these memories of the other gods and like her past life and like the things that she's done. And this is happening while she's reading the enchantment to raise the walls of the fortress. Shows up at this point. She, you know, so like she successfully pulled up the fortress, and he touches her to pull her out of her magic, right? And they kiss, they're making out a little bit. And, you know, Aaron, who has been fighting to reach her, passes out, and Sylvia like checks that he's alive, and she hands him over to Jeru and is just like, keep him alive for me. And she goes to Sepha, and she's just like, Sepha's obviously crying about Marek, and she's just like, you didn't deserve this, but like, you'll survive. I love you. Goodbye. She tells them like, if Aaron tries to come after me, stop him. And so she goes back to the fortress, which she hadn't finished raising all the way. And she, you know, starts raising it, and she sees Aaron has stood up and is standing on the other side. And basically this is where Sylvia admits, like, so this whole time I've been going crazy, like this is the magic madness. You were right, it's real. But funny enough, like, it's not just magic madness, like I am the madness. I'm Roviel. And Aaron's like, what the fuck? And she's basically like, I can't stay. Like, if I have the power of a god, like the world would never survive it. So like, I have to leave. you know, she had been using the scepter during all of this. And so she breaks it and she watches him transform from like his pale white haired self back to like the color he should have been, healthy looking with black hair. After she successfully raised this fortress and everything, she decides to destroy it because she says, "What I could not bear was the thought of leaving Jasad trapped behind me, barricaded behind this fortress as they had been for hundreds of years, their magic dwindling on the other side, cut off from the kingdoms during the most widespread political upheaval the land had seen in centuries." So it's like, you know, the other three countries are at war. So you're just going to take away your country's defense that you literally just created? What? And it's like mentioned multiple times. People went to Jasad back when the fortress was still up. They're not completely walled off. She's acting as if nobody was ever able to visit or communicate with Jasad. Like, clearly there's a gate. They can trade. It's just protection against giant armies. I don't know. I didn't get that. And she's just like, "Bye. I love you, everyone." And then she just dumps herself over the side of the bridge. And she wakes up in the entombment, where the other three gods are after they killed Rovio. And they reveal, like, yeah, no, like we killed him, we chopped him up into pieces, and he dissolved into the river. And that's how it's been infecting people once a century. She's like trying to like reconcile all of her strange memories because now she's like, these are my siblings. I'm in love. Like, I love them. And basically they immediately are like, but actually for the last 7,000 years, we have been thinking about maybe giving our magic back to the world. So we can try it in a different way than we did last time, the way that made him Rovio go crazy. But who knows how long it'll take. Can't give you a date on it, but we're going to try. And that way we can return to Earth. Which I'm like, what a cop out. What a cop out. So we flash forward to a month later. Sepha is back in Lakub, where she finds out that she was actually named the heir by Vida. So now she is the Sultana of Lakub. And then 2 years later, in Omal, Firel is chilling by the river, skipping class, when blue stuff from the river just latches onto her, and dun dun dun, she now has the Omalian magic, because the magic presents differently in each of the different countries. So like Jasad is the silver and gold, Lakub has the like, I think it was like pink flowers blossoming in their eyes, and then in Omal it's blue and white. And then 6 years later, Sepha is in Jasad visiting everyone and that survived, and it's basically just like, yeah, they're just like talking about Aaron, basically like, yeah, I know, you know, that he's the supreme of Nizal. He's doing a good job, but like something's dead inside him because he lost Sylvia. And then we're 10 years later, where Aaron decides to go back for the what was it, Nazareth Comet, where the fog falls, and so he goes back to the bridge, but he doesn't invite anybody because he's like, I don't know, he wants to be alone in his suffering. And of course, yeah, and the figures walk towards him, and dun dun dun, Sylvia and the other gods back to live on Earth. And this is just like a huge pet peeve of mine. I'm like, why do we have women die and then come back 10 years later as if this dude's suffering for a decade is like equivalent to reincarnation? I don't know. Like, or coming back to life as a reward because he cried for 10 years. And then now he's a middle-aged man with this 20-year-old girlfriend. And I'm like, yeah, she's a god. Frequently, though, when this trope happens, it's like they're not like an immortal god's consciousness. I don't know. It's just a huge pet peeve of mine. And let me search for cufflink. Yeah, so the cufflink is literally only discussed in chapter 38, and being the symbol from the one war battle thing. And I just can't figure out what in the world the cufflink was for. Anyone else? Let's go through my 51 highlights on the book. There's a sentence, Namsa stepped outside while I tossed through the clothes. Weird choice of words right here. And here she's talking about over the side, of the mountain raged the sea of 100 names, the sea few had dared cross the mountains to explore, and fewer still had survived the journey. I couldn't believe it. It had been a century since anyone had laid eyes on the sea beyond the mountains. Even when every kingdom had had its magic, it was widely considered an act of lunacy to undertake the journey to Suna Sea. Why bother when you could access it through any of the wilayas in southern Jasad? The lower wilayas generated half their income from those visitors. Pay a fee to pass through the Jasad fortress and visit the sea, or potentially go through the mountains and pay with your life. Okay, but Nizal has a huge stretch of coastline. Like, you don't need to go to Jasad, according to this map. I do think there was more description in this book than compared to the first one, about like some of the rooms in the Citadel and what people look like. And all of them were in like Aaron's point of view. When Aaron sees Sylvia for the first time as like a hallucination, the woman who couldn't be the Jasad heir stepped toward the side of the east wing and poked it. Aaron took a step forward. His hand slid into the left pocket of his coat, closing around the thin, needle-like blade. It would immobilize her long enough for the right restraints and reinforcements to arrive. His hand spasmed around the knife. This wasn't real. She would never be this reckless. And then a page later, his first instinct when he saw her wasn't to reach for his blade or summon the guards. It was to shout, "Run." It wasn't, though. Her teeth clattered. I don't know. Weird choice. Despite the chasm of secrets between myself and the Nizal heir, he'd inspired a rare honesty out of me. Around him, I could be sullen and quiet, vicious and loud, careful and cunning. Any mask I wore crumbled beneath his scrutiny. I don't think that's really ever shown, right? The lines on Rowain's forehead smoothed, his shoulders easing into a casual slump, the feigned relaxation of a performer stretching before the stage. Were I less repulsed, I would be inclined to take notes. This was how you told a lie. But you know he's lying, so that's not how you tell a lie. I don't know. Like, you see him visibly change, like, while he's planning his answer, and you're like, wow, this is such a good liar. No. And then during the fight at Maher, right, Sylvia, spear aloft, I bolted toward the fighting. And then the next page, it says, I dragged him the rest of the way to the ground and rammed my knife through his throat. I'd left the axes and spears, anything with a longer range, to the less experienced among the villagers, which meant the deaths I delivered today would be nice and close. You just had a spear. You literally had a spear. The same scene. You were running with a spear, you drag some dude around, and then you're like, oh, I left the spears for everyone else. No. And then plunging the dagger strapped to my waist into his chest. That just comes off like she has the knife stuck to her waist and she somehow stabs him with it. I hurled to my knees beside Raya. I hurled to my knees? Like, that just makes me think like you vomited up to your knees. I don't know. And then in this chapter, Aaron's vest is described like 50 million ways. Every lace on his vest perfectly tied. Somehow his vest had remained unscathed in the melee. The black clasps over his chest buckled tight. Aaron paused in the middle of untying the straps of his vest. I advanced on him, the tip of my dagger pressing into his half-laced vest. This is the same fight. This is literally the same fight, guys. What is he wearing? I have no idea, right? And then Huron snaked through the woods, seeming to chase us across the acres. Well, I don't know. On the map, it mostly borders it. And then when Sepha chops off Vida's finger, it says she applies a tourniquet, but I'm like, where would the tourniquet be if you chopped off the whole finger the ring is on? Like, you can't tie around here where the blood's coming out, so you're tying it around her wrist? Because, like, if you leave a tourniquet on, it's to stop blood flow. Potentially, depending on how long that tourniquet is left on, they'll lose the limb. So she's like, oh, she'll survive. I only chopped off a finger, but also I'm cutting off blood flow to her entire lower arm. Like, what? Okay. And then when Sylvia's examining all of her silver and gold magic veins, it says thin gold and silver veins snaked up the side of her neck, disappearing into her tunic. And here, finally, 80% of the way, 80% through the second book, we finally learn what seeds these people are eating. 80%. Legs outstretched beside mine on the ground, Maya offered me a handful of sunflower seeds. Like, yeah, I assumed they were sunflower seeds, but I don't know. It's a fantasy novel. It could have been anything. And then remember how she talked about in the first book at the very beginning how, oh no, I wasn't able to tie my hair back up because I was pretending to go to bed because of Sepha and Marek. And here at 81%, she says, I swallowed. I had not seen him look like this since the Mariah. So she's like looking at Aaron, thinking he's sexy. Your hair. If I went to sleep with my hair down, I would wake up with half of it stuck together and spend the next bath negotiating each curl apart. You go to sleep with your hair down, and it takes you one lazy swipe of your fingers to tame it again. So like here she is saying, I don't sleep with my hair down. So why was her hair down in the first book? Plot contrivances. And see how in the first book, she's always like making these metaphors and similes about the different countries. And at 82%, she says, once Jasad is safe and my best utility is not in front of an army or beneath a crown, I think I would want to travel, I said, surprising myself. I thought about it often as a child. Exploring. I would beg Dawood and Soraya to take me to their wilayas. Usur Jasad felt enormous to many who passed through its doors, but it always felt so limited to me. I climbed to the trees in the gardens every day, looking down at the world and wishing I could be part of it. I practically screamed myself hoarse until Gedo Niar and Tetapalia agreed to take me to the summit with them. Okay, so here, again, more evidence that she never traveled. Why would she know how it rains in whatever country? And then Aaron talking about Vida's procession from the Ivory Palace, presumably. He says she will use the bulk of her army to tear through those soldiers, and the rest she will send around the mountains. Aaron's finger moved over the wall, where they will enter Nizal through the lower villages. Because she's attacking the front of the citadel and then going around the mountains to this other part of Nizal, but the mountains are at the top of Nizal. She wouldn't need to go around any mountains. The mountains are in a straight line on this map. And then at 88%, a silk ivory dress. I don't know, like, usually you do color material. Like, there's an order of adjectives that feel correct. So it would be an ivory silk dress, right? The ivory part is what's different from the silk dress part, right? Like a shaggy black dog. Of the black dogs, the shaggy part is what I'm drawing attention to. And I feel like this is the first time people mention where the Blood Summit actually took place. At 98% of the way through the book, attending the summit in Orban. Ugh, I don't know. Again, I really had zero issues with the plot points. I wanted to like the story, but just the execution was so not great. I don't know. It was just so stressful to read. Listening to it again, I was just bored out of my mind, which was unfortunate because I think both of the narrators did a fantastic job. Like, there was a lot of emotion in their storytelling. And while the male narrator definitely can't do women's voices at all, I still enjoyed the intonation and kind of the beats that he was hitting as he read things. And the female narrator, I thought she did a fantastic job, but I did kind of laugh because in the first book, they went on and on about how Sylvia doesn't have an accent. She had been trained out of it as a child, but other people have accents. And then the narrator decided to narrate all of Sylvia's chapters with an accent. But then she narrated Sepha's chapters with just a standard American accent. So it was kind of funny. I felt like those should be switched. I don't know. But I guess she kind of gave Sepha this sort of Valley Girl-ish subtle vibe. I don't know. And then the implication of the insignia, maybe I'm just stupid and missed it, but I Googled it and there's so many people on Reddit also I don't even know what that was for. The only assumption we really have is that it was so that Jeru could confront that section leader who was taking the bribes, but again, he was taking the bribes. He would have had the evidence. I don't know. I feel like that was a thread that was dropped completely. Yeah, I don't know. I've gone through the book searching for Siege of Six Dawns, cufflink, insignia, anything to figure out what it was for, and there's literally nothing other than the fact in the same chapter as Marek handing it to Jeru's like, not exactly, and then he uses it to confront the guy, but it doesn't make sense how that would work to confront the guy. I don't know. Additionally, it's never explained why the cuffs came off of Sylvia's wrists. Like, there was no mechanism for it. In this book, there's a scene where the man who put the cuffs on her for her mom says, like, we don't know if they'll ever come off. And the mom is like, that's fine. So clearly there wasn't a mechanism for them to come off. They just randomly decided to pop off, even though they look unharmed. And there was nothing indicating that, like, they were wearing out or anything, which again just gives more of this feeling that, like, everything just happened so conveniently with her magic. She doesn't have to try anything. I'm honestly really shocked that I've seen so many videos of people raving about this duology. Like, it was so promising and then let me down. Like, I felt like 40% of the story was missing. We would just jump from climax of plot event to climax of plot event. And it's like the whole point of the climax of the plot event is that we lead up to it. You don't just like jump into the middle of the battle and then jump to the next thing and then jump to the next thing. Like, it kind of felt like the first part was dragging out. I don't know. It was just a lot of time jumping, a lot of logical inconsistencies. I didn't like Sylvia's character because I didn't feel like we ever knew her. She just tells us everything. Everything's just tell. I watched a TikTok yesterday, actually, that like really summed up how I feel about this. And it was talking about romance books where, you know, people are trying to like build up sexual tension, but then they say stuff like, what was the example she used? I'm like he held his straw like it was foreplay or something. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, you need to show me how she's reacting to him. I don't know, running his finger up and down the straw or putting it in his mouth or whatever. And the woman gave a bunch of examples on like this trend. And I was like, you said it for me. You said it for me. And unfortunately, my husband was the one flipping through TikTok. So I don't even know who said it. I mean, it was a woman. That's what this felt like. It was like from Aaron's chapters, we got way more description about stuff and like from his point of view and like visual representations of things versus Sylvia's. It just felt like we weren't getting anything. And like she would say one thing and then she would verbally say one thing and then say inside her head that she was feeling something different, and or she wouldn't explain what she was actually feeling. I'm just having to like go off of her dialogue that's floating in the middle of nowhere. And I never saw her. I never felt her. It was like she was just talking at me about something that she went through and not in like a fun, chatty way. This was the longest 2 days of my life having to re-listen to this. I knew. I should have DNF'd when I saw that sandal boot mix up in the first book. Because I know. It's downhill from there. Oh well. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about The Jasad Crown by Sarah Hashem. Hopefully the next book I read is more enjoyable. Well, that is all for now. I will see you next time.